Story 1. The Flickering Screen. While sorting through my late uncle's belongings, I came across an old television set from the 1980s. It looked like a relic, but I thought it would be a fun addition to my living room as a quirky conversation piece. I plugged it in, and to my surprise, it flickered to life, the screen displaying static before settling on a channel filled with grainy images. At first, I found it amusing, the old cartoons playing in distorted form, but something felt off. The images shifted, and the sounds began to distort, fading into garbled laughter and strange whispers. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the old technology malfunctioning. As night fell, I settled down to watch, the flickering light casting eerie shadows around the room. Then, I noticed something strange. In the static, I could make out shadowy figures moving in the background, their faces obscured but their movements unnaturally jerky. My heart raced as I leaned closer to the screen, trying to discern what I was seeing. Suddenly, the figures turned to face me, their expressions twisted into grotesque smiles. I jumped back, gasping, and the TV suddenly cut out. The room fell silent, and I felt a chill sweep through the air. I tried to turn it back on, but the screen remained dark. Disturbed, I decided to leave it for the night. As I lay in bed, I heard faint laughter drifting through the walls, the same unsettling sound from the television. I convinced myself I was imagining things, but the next night, I felt compelled to try the TV again. As soon as I turned it on, the figures reappeared, now more defined, their mouths moving as if trying to speak. "Join us," they whispered in unison. Panic surged within me. I yanked the plug from the wall and hastily shoved the TV into the garage, vowing never to touch it again. Yet even now, in the silence of the night, I can still hear their laughter echoing in my mind. Story 2. The Unmarked Grave. While hiking in the countryside, I stumbled upon a small, overgrown cemetery hidden among the trees. It was a place that seemed long forgotten, the gravestones worn and tilted. One grave in particular caught my eye, an unmarked stone surrounded by wildflowers. An overwhelming sense of sadness washed over me, compelling me to approach. As I knelt beside the grave, I felt a strange warmth enveloping me. It was a serene moment, yet it felt heavy with unspoken stories. I glanced around, feeling as though I was being watched. The rustling leaves whispered secrets, and the air was thick with anticipation. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, hoping to research the grave later. But as I raised the camera, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing. The temperature dropped, and I heard a soft sobbing in the distance, drawing my attention. I looked up to see a figure standing among the trees, a woman in a flowing white dress, her face hidden by her long hair. She raised a hand, pointing toward the unmarked grave. Fear gripped me, but curiosity won. I stood and approached her, but as I did, she vanished, leaving only the sound of her weeping. I felt compelled to dig a little at the grave, driven by an unknown force. As I scraped away the soil, my heart raced. Suddenly, I uncovered a small, tarnished locket. It opened to reveal a faded photograph of the woman I had just seen, her face full of sorrow. I gasped as I realized she was reaching out for help even from beyond the grave. That night, I returned home, the image of her haunting me. I researched the area and discovered that the grave belonged to a woman who had vanished many years ago, her death shrouded in mystery. I returned to the cemetery the next day, but the grave was once again unmarked. It was as if the land had swallowed her secrets whole, leaving me to wonder if I had truly encountered her spirit, or if it was all just a figment of my imagination. Story 3. The Haunted Painting. While browsing an art gallery, I was drawn to a particular painting that seemed to resonate with me. It depicted a serene landscape, but there was a dark figure lurking in the shadows, barely visible. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was watching me. Despite the unsettling aura, I decided to purchase it, intrigued by the emotions it evoked. Once hung in my living room, the painting seemed to have a life of its own. At first, I admired it, but over time, I began to feel an oppressive weight whenever I looked at it. The figure appeared to shift positions subtly, its eyes following me as I moved around the room. I tried to ignore it, but the sensation grew stronger each day. One evening, as I was reading, I heard a soft whisper coming from the painting. "Help me!" I froze, my heart racing. I turned to look at it, and the figure seemed closer, its expression twisted in anguish. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but the whispers continued, growing more desperate. "Please, don't leave me here." That night I couldn't sleep. I felt compelled to confront the painting. I stood in front of it, trembling, and asked, "What do you want?" To my shock, the figure seemed to shift again, its mouth moving silently. I reached out, half expecting something to happen, and the air around me thickened. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and I heard a loud crash from the other room. I spun around, startled, and when I turned back, the painting had fallen from the wall, shattering the frame. Inside, I found an old, faded letter addressed to someone named Margaret. It was filled with sorrowful words, detailing a life cut short. I buried the painting in the backyard, hoping to put the haunting behind me. But sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers carried on the wind, and I wonder if Margaret is still searching for solace. Story 4. The Midnight Train. One night I was driving home late after a long shift at work. The roads were deserted, the moon casting an eerie glow over the landscape. As I drove past an old train station, I noticed a flickering light coming from the platform. Curiosity piqued. I pulled over to investigate, remembering stories of an abandoned train that had been left to rust. As I stepped out of my car, I heard the distant sound of a train whistle, though no train was in sight. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I approached the platform. The flickering light illuminated an old train car, its door slightly ajar. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, I felt an inexplicable pull to step inside. The interior was covered in dust, remnants of a bygone era. As I wandered through, I began to hear whispers, soft and urgent, beckoning me to come closer. I felt a cold breeze brush past me, sending chills down my spine. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. Panic surged within me, and I banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, echoing in my ears. "Help us! Help us!" They were desperate, filled with pain. I stumbled through the train car, searching for a way out, but the windows were boarded up, and I felt a suffocating presence closing in on me. In a moment of sheer terror, I rushed to the door, throwing my weight against it. With one final push, it burst open, and I stumbled out onto the platform, gasping for air. The whispers faded, but I could still feel their presence lingering in the air. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror to see the train car illuminated in ghostly light, as if the spirits within were watching me leave. Story 5. The Old Hotel. My friends and I decided to spend a weekend at an old hotel known for its haunted history. The moment we arrived, the atmosphere felt heavy, filled with unspoken stories. As we checked in, the receptionist smiled but warned us to stay away from the third floor, where strange occurrences were said to happen. Naturally, we were intrigued and decided to explore. The third floor was dimly lit and eerily quiet. As we wandered down the hallway, the air grew colder, and I could have sworn I saw shadows flicker at the edges of my vision. My friends laughed and joked, but I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. We approached one of the rooms, and the door creaked open on its own. Curiosity overwhelmed us, and we stepped inside. The room was frozen in time, with dusty furniture and peeling wallpaper. As I examined an old photograph on the wall, I felt a chill sweep through the room, and the door slammed shut behind us. The laughter faded as we realized we were trapped. We pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in, and then we heard it. A soft, melodic humming coming from the corner of the room. It was soothing, yet unnerving, and I felt a strange compulsion to follow the sound. I turned to see a figure standing by the window, cloaked in shadows, swaying gently to the tune. My friends and I exchanged terrified glances as the figure turned, revealing hollow eyes and an eerie smile. I screamed, and in that moment, the door swung open. We rushed out, fleeing the third floor and vowing never to return. As we checked out, I glanced back at the hotel, feeling a lingering sense of dread. I knew the stories were true, and some places should remain undisturbed, their secrets buried in the shadows.